Hello, everyone. Hope everyone had a great week. Hope you've done some good gaming, and welcome to Mechanical Muse Live, where we talk about all the things that folks like us like, whether it's toys or games or movies or cool television shows or books, comics, you name it. We'll talk about it here. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a number of cool things to talk about, and we're going to try to keep the show a little shorter this week because I know I keep going over lately because we're talking about a lot of stuff we're excited about. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get rolling. So first up, mail call. The first bit of mail call I want to share with you here is I actually finally have some actual gaming mail call that I want to share with all of you. So you're probably familiar with Mutant Year Zero. And if you're not, it's a game by Free League Publishing, and it is a fantastic game. It is different than other role-playing games I've played. I'm not going to try to get into what the Year Zero system is like here. Maybe we'll do that another time. We'll maybe talk a little bit more about it in depth. But it is a very fun game. And here's what I loved about the Mutant Year Zero game that made it different from anything else I played. I picked up this book. I read it cover to cover, and I felt like it was a single encapsulated game. It had all the rules. It had an adventure. It had a goal. You're heading for Eden. And once you get there, you've won the game. It was actually really cool because so often games are designed, role-playing games are designed about that, playing it again and again and again in a long campaign. And I love that. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But to put out this game that felt so tightly encapsulated and so focused on what it was supposed to do, absolutely love the way that it was put together like that. And I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. So what does this have to do with our mail call? Well, I can tell you, I received this Mutant Year Zero Ad Astra, just ordered it. By the way, nothing I show on here is like free or promotional. If I ever is, I'll tell you, but this is just something that I'd wanted. I ordered it. It's the space edition of the game. And to let me just give you a quick read of what's in store if you pick this up. Through the tiny portholes of the space capsule, you see the city hanging weightlessly beneath the stars. Massive, sprawling, gleaming. A myriad of metal shapes connected by tubes and wires. Like a huge hanging mobile over Earth, the poisoned cradle of humanity. Ad Astra is a thrilling campaign module for Mutant Year Zero that takes the player characters from the devastated surface of Earth into orbit, out into the solar system, and perhaps further still. And so, yeah, I can't wait to go through this. I'd love to run it for my friends sometime. We played through Mutant Year Zero previously, so very excited about this. It's a cool sort of next storyline, and I hope it has that same sort of self-encapsulated feel that the other one did. So I'll let you know once we play it. So that's our mail call for the day. Let's talk a little bit about game night. Yeah, you know, we've been running Cool Name Goes Here on game night. That has been happening, and it's been a lot of fun. One of the things that we had this past week is an encounter that I'm going to be writing up and posting. So if your GM is watching this as well, and you're a player in their game, a Cool Name RPG, maybe plug your ears for a second or mute it, and I'll give you a signal like this when it's safe to come back. But one of this encounter, the way that this works is we wanted to use escalating challenge ratings. And so created this encounter in the jungle where they come across this strange pit of black ooze. And it looks like a tar pit when you first look at it. And there's a deer at the edge of it scrambling to get out. And the players need to decide, are they going to help this deer? Are they just going to keep their distance? Now, people who've gamed for years will probably keep their distance, but good role players will still go in there and take a look at this thing. And they go in there to take a look at it just as the deer is being sucked underneath the black ooze. And then all of a sudden it starts bubbling as they turn to leave. And they turn around and out of the ooze jumps this deer-shaped object. It is the deer, but is completely covered and suffused with this black ooze. It is then comes at them and it's semi-prehensile as it's reaching out for them. And this deer comes running. Now, that's where the combat starts. We roll for initiative and the battle begins as this thing tries to grab onto them and absorb them into itself. But it gets better because we start out with a base challenge rating, but then every round that challenge rating goes up. And what that represents are more creatures crawling out of the ooze, creatures that have been sucked in there over the years. And now it sees a chance to bring in more prey and drag them into the ooze as well. And so at different points, the characters have certain challenge rating levels. You have situations that happen like a certain type of attack or a certain type of special action, like the one that starts spitting ooze at them. You know, that one comes out when you hit like 15 challenge rating as it goes up. So if the players aren't bringing it down fast enough, the situation gets bad quickly, even has the potential to drag one of the players into the pit itself. And it worked beautifully, just absolutely fantastic. Love the way that this works with that escalating challenge rating, where the challenge rating represents the overall difficulty of the encounter you're playing. Now, I still like to give individual monsters challenge ratings in most encounters, but for this encounter, it was effectively one threat, and overcoming that one threat is what it was all about. So anyway, escalating challenge ratings worked really well. The heroes did escape in case, so you don't worry. They made it out alive and they made it on to the next part of the adventure. But yeah, it was a very cool moment for them. And it was a really cool test of the escalating challenge rating system. Who, by the way, I want to give another hat tip. I probably said it before, but I'll say it again, to DBJ for a lot of the ideas that we've incorporated in around this, because really helped to inspire some good thinking outside of the box. He's one of our consulting designers who you might recognize the name. Okay, this is your signal. Maybe if you don't notice, you can come back now and we won't have any more spoilers for you. So let's talk a little bit more. What else do we have to share with you today? Oh, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the images that you're seeing at the beginning of the show. Now, assuming you didn't fast forward past the cool music and pictures at the start, you probably saw a picture of Ancient Aliens. Well, I actually saw Ancient Aliens live. Pretty sure I've mentioned this before because it was awesome. I'm not going to say that I'm a big believer in the ideas of Ancient Aliens. I kind of love the fact that they aren't held back by reality or evidence. They just simply go wherever their minds take them. And it's pretty fun to watch. It's a very fun show. But yeah, seeing them live talking about it, including I'm not saying it's aliens guy. Ton of fun. And so you probably spotted that. That was at the Kalamazoo Theater, and it was a really good time. All right, so let's get into Cool Name. I know it's what you're probably eager to hear about, so let's go ahead and start talking. So today, I promised you we would talk about social encounters. Now, social encounters, we've talked about the fact that we have a few different encounter types, and social encounters are one of those encounter types. Now, one thing I want to make really clear, although each of these encounter types are different, we call them social encounters, action encounters, exploration encounters. At the end of the day, they're all the same thing. You can really blend them all together if you wanted to. You don't have to split these out as separate things, but it's easier to do this from the position of having a conversation about it, on teaching the rules, and on allowing people to create their own mods to the Cool Name RPG rule system. So let's talk a little bit about it. So first off, I want to define the difference between a social encounter and a social interaction. All right. A social interaction is the characters walking through the market, buying things. You don't have to do turns. You don't have to use the core mechanics for that. You can just role play it. You can have a good time. You can encounter the king and maybe have a debate about an important topic or try to convince them of something without having a social encounter. The point of a social encounter is if a game master wants to build out an important aspect of the adventure. We've talked about how adventures are a series of encounters laced together. And so a social encounter is one of the types of encounters you can have. And by having different types of encounters, you create a much richer, exciting storyline for the players. So social encounters are a slightly more structured social interaction, right? At this point, we start bringing in some of the character stats. And here's one of the reasons why I like to have a mix of things. Social interactions where you're just role playing are wonderful for people who love to role play. It's great. They love it. They get into it. They're doing all sorts of cool stuff. They absolutely love doing that storytelling live, the improv that goes along with it. But not everybody is that person. And by having some of your social interactions to be social encounters, you create an opportunity for characters to play a character who might be more socially adept than they are. And that's part of the fun of gaming, is playing something you're not. I'm not probably ever, not probably, I need to admit the fact that I will never be a skilled sword fighter. However, in my game, I can be, and it's fun. And so let's take a look here at what social encounters are like. So first off, they used rounds and turns like any other type of encounter. One of the key things, though, is that in social encounters, I see and have seen and are playing, the encounter, the round length can vary very much over the course of the encounter. So in our example, we start out with an encounter that is about an hour per round. And that might sound like a lot, but if you think about it as going to a party, at the beginning, there's just some drifting about and talking to one another and getting to know people. And so by having that larger round length at the beginning, you create sort of a slow roll into the action that's soon to come. Next up, you start getting things going a little faster. Maybe once they've gotten around, made a couple of rolls towards their goal, whatever that goal might be, then you start to speed things up as things start to heat up. Perhaps an adversary arrives and starts trying to push back in the opposite direction of the players. Now maybe your encounters change to 15-minute, your rounds, sorry, change to 15-minute rounds. Things are picking up pace as you go along. And then eventually you might even get down to like 1-minute rounds or even 6-second rounds, just like in combat. Or maybe it turns into combat, which often happens with social encounters in role-playing games. But let's just talk a little bit more about this as I pull through here. So we've talked a little bit about the round length, okay? Initiative as well. Initiative is not always necessary when you have a really long round length. When your round length is like an hour long, who goes first doesn't really matter. Everyone's kind of acting at the same time and sort of melding together. And I would encourage people not to roll for initiative in those situations. As far as challenge scores go, same concepts as for any other type of encounter, where the challenge score is representative of the overall problem the characters are trying to solve. And so in our own game, one of the challenge scores we had is, I talked about this briefly before, but we had a scene where the party was traveling up the river in the jungle, and they came to a camp, and there were all these people camped out there and a bunch of other merchants and explorers and other folks. And they said to me, they go, "Look, Mark, we want to try to get more information about what these people have seen." So I looked at it and went, all right, that's interesting. They want to get more information, but it's late in the day. Everyone's tired. So they're going to have a limited amount of time. So I'm going to say they've got 4 rounds to make this work. And I'm going to say that each round is going to be half an hour long. So they've got just a couple hours before everyone's ready to turn in, and the hanging around by the fire is enough for everyone. They're ready to call it a day. All right, so we've got 4 rounds. Challenge rating, I'm going to give it as a 12. Now that's not too shabby. That's a tough challenge rating. It can be. And what they need to do in order for them to pull enough information of value and have me reveal the secrets that they're looking for, they need to overcome that challenge rating. And what's cool about this is that it's not necessarily about asking the perfect question, right? It's not about knowing. And this is really important. We'll talk about this in my next bit that I want to tell you about, the third time's a charm. But if you have only a single piece of information that can only be gotten a certain way, players might spend all night trying to figure out what that magical way is to get that information and never guess it, because there are infinite possibilities of what they could be trying to find out. And so by doing it this way, you allow the story to progress in a way that reveals the information they need while not limiting the players to a single action that will work or not work. Okay. So they start asking around. First player goes over, says, you know what? I'm not going to do that great at any of the roles, but I want to assist our guy over here, right? I want to assist the explorer. He's good at this sort of thing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to eye up someone who looks like they've seen a thing or two, right? The ones who look like they've been out there and maybe they've found something a little bit crazy. So I can sort of identify them as a good person to talk to. And so here it is. They don't need to know the perfect person to talk to, and yet their character still can do something really cool in the game. So they talk to them. He makes a roll. He beats it by 2. Fantastic. 2 effect. He's going to add 2 to the action score of the character who eventually asks the question. Another character on their turn decides that they want to go around and loosen lips by getting everybody telling stories. So they start telling their own stories of things that happen in the hopes of getting other people to join in and tell their tales. And so that character is a storyteller, not really good at convincing people to do things, but they can certainly tell a good yarn and get everyone on board. And so they added that to it as well. And slowly they're adding these things in. They added a modifier. They added some action score bonuses. And when it came time on the 3rd turn, and they know they're running out of time at this point, on the 3rd turn, the character decides to make an action check to see if they can get that information and get that challenge score down. Now, it's a little risky taking this route. Maybe trying a bunch of times in a row might have been better for them, but they decided to give this a shot because they thought this was their best chance. He rolls. Even with his action score bonuses, though, nothing quite works. The guy who looks like he's seen a thing or two clams up. The guys who are telling stories are, as soon as he tries to get more information out of them, they pull back and like, whoa, trade secrets and all that. I don't mind telling a few fun stories, but we're not going to go there. And what happened was an encounter that effectively ended in a failure was a fun adventure to play. The characters got little tidbits, and I was able to sprinkle in some hints of things that they might find without giving them the actual information they were hoping to get. So just because they didn't succeed, by taking this approach, it was still a fun encounter. Now, what can happen normally in games, and I've seen this happen way too many times, is if you're trying to find that specific magical piece of information, you spend an hour of game time asking all the wrong questions and getting more and more frustrated and just being ready to say, look, we don't care. We just go to bed and we're just going to walk around the jungle tomorrow. It doesn't matter. And it takes the fun out of it. But with this, we ended up having a really fun story injected into our adventure. So I would encourage people to give this a shot. It's a really cool way to play social encounters. Now, I'll tell you about one other thing: social combat. We've talked about this briefly before, but again, social combat is a completely different animal. Now, we do have rules that allow you to make attacks against a person's mind or spirit to wear them down over time and get and defeat them in that fashion. If you were to wear someone down and reduce their mind vitality to 0, they're a wreck. They are on the floor. They're curled up in the corner. They can't make any decisions. They're completely confused. That's a little bit different than what we're talking about when we talk about social combat. Social combat, think of it as sparring, as boxing, social boxing. No one's going to walk away with a wound, but you certainly might have some repercussions for the things you do. So in this, you literally play it out like a combat. And you create a storyline where the two characters are going at each other back and forth. Maybe this is a debate, an academic debate, and they're both trying to make excellent points. Maybe this is a haggling opportunity and you're trying to go back and forth. Whoever reduces one of the other person's mind or spirit scores to 0 has overcome their opponent in this war of words and has won the day for their party and accomplished whatever it is they wanted to accomplish. So this can be very fun when there's something important at stake, like the support of a duke, or they have to get this item that they're trying to purchase and they need to get it. They have to make this work. It's a very fun way to turn a social engagement into a rich encounter full of different sorts of actions, because any of the action types are available. You can obstruct the enemy. You can try to assist your friend by offering more information. You can do all of these different things just like you can in a combat, but it's all about a social engagement, and it is a ton of fun to do. So check that out. All this stuff needs more play testing, so don't get me wrong. We need you guys to still look at all this and play test it. But social encounters are a lot of fun, and I do hope that you guys will dig in there and try this out and give this a shot. There's a lot of cool things that we can do with it. So one last thing I want to mention about this is, a couple of things to talk about. It's important to encourage the players to tell a story. So when a character says, I want to assist my friend in trying to gather the information, make them tell a story of how they're assisting. Make them come up with this idea of telling a tale around the fire that'll get the other people engaged. Encourage them to find a way to make it more than just a dice roll and actually a part of the tale, because that's what will make the game the most successful when you sit down to play it. So that's it for social encounters today. I don't have a lot more that I'm going to talk about there. Let me see if I can get myself back on the screen here. But yeah, social encounters are going to be a lot of fun. Now, I have sent out social encounters to Robin Laws to give me some feedback on. I'm eager to hear what his thoughts are. It's an area that he knows a lot about. And so I will share that with you when I hear it. Keep in mind too, like I said, I've sent out a number of emails to our other consulting designers. So I'm very excited to hear what they have to say about some of the new rules. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here. We're going to step away from Cool Name RPG for a second and talk about gaming in general. So this is the topic of an article I wrote a long time ago, my very first gaming publication in Dragon Magazine, which was like the greatest thing that had ever happened to me. But I call it third time's a charm. Third time's a charm is a technique you can use when you're running a game for mysteries. Mysteries, remember what I was talking about in social encounters where you're searching for the perfect thing to ask or the perfect person to talk to, and because there are infinite possibilities, it's kind of impossible to do. Mysteries are a little like that. If you've ever tried to run a mystery in an RPG, it is tricky. It is very tricky. And I'm not talking even a big mystery. I'm just talking a little mystery, like who stole the maidenhead off the prow of the ship, right? That sort of a thing. It doesn't have to be huge, but it can still be very hard to try to figure out. Well, one thing you'll notice in a lot of adventure stories and TV shows and movies is that for some reason, the rule of three stays true. They might come up with 3 different theories over the course of trying to solve that mystery, but on the third one, they figure it out. Now, your players don't need to know this. So if you're a player, try to wipe this from your mind or something. But your players don't need to know you're doing this. But what you do is you allow them to start exploring, and they will solve the mystery for you and find their own clues. All right. So, for example, let's say they need to figure out who robbed the innkeeper. Great. They start asking questions around, and they're asking, did you see anything? And as a game master, you can just tell them what the character saw. Say, well, I saw a shadowy figure searching around the outside of the inn, and it seemed really weird that they were there. And then they ask someone else, say, did you see a shadowy figure? Say, yeah, I did. They were headed west towards the market district. And they go, at this point, the party stops and goes, wait a minute. Earlier, we saw a shadowy figure at the shop that sells blankets. He was hanging out at the back of the shop. And maybe this was just some weird thing I threw out there. They say, I bet that's who it is. Let's go check it out. So they all go racing over there and they start searching around for clues and things. And just when they think they've got it, they find something, but they're like, this is it. But no, that's not it. The person has an alibi. It's no good. And they're like, well, that is frustrating. Who could it be? And at this point, they'll go back to what they already talked about. And they'll start thinking to themselves, wait a minute. What about that pot boy we saw who was working with the innkeeper? He looked pretty poor. He seemed like a nice kid, but what if he's not? And so they go over and start talking to this kid, and they find his home, and they search him out and look for him, and they start putting together these pieces. And again, I don't even have to tell you what the clues are, because they will find clues themselves, and you can say, interesting. I see. That seems odd, doesn't it? So when they look at something, they say, well, was that door open before? And you say, I'm not sure that it was. What do you think? And at this point, you start adding to this and you sort of let them run with it themselves. But they see the pop boy, and sure enough, he didn't do it. He's a good kid just trying to make his way in the world. But he did see someone locking the door later that night than there should have been anyone there. So now the players have this last guess. What could it be? Who could it be? They start putting all the pieces together. They're a little bit frustrated, but just in a good way, right? And then now, boom, they come up with it. The innkeeper's trying to hide their own money so that they can get so they don't have to pay off the debt that they owe. That's what it is. I'm sure that's what it is. They go running, they find the innkeeper, they throw open the door, and sure enough, there's the bag of money hidden under the bed, because the third time's the charm. Whoever they went to the third time, that's who solved the clue, the who committed the crime, and every person in the room is like cheering because they figured it out and they feel clever and happy and they had a great time solving this mystery. I've used this many, many times. My players, they don't see it coming most of the time, and they just think you're a genius for putting all these amazing clues out there when in fact they wrote the story themselves. So I encourage you to try Third Time's the Charm with your party. It's a very fun way to run a game, and it's a very cool way to do a mystery. All right, folks, we are pretty much out of time, so I'm going to give you a quick update on what's next on Cool Name RPG. Right now in the Discords, we're having some conversations. We're talking about a few different topics. One of the topics is, should we use the term game master or something else? There have been a whole lot of different ideas. Game moderator, for example, lore keeper, storyteller, all sorts of different terms that we could use. And I'm not saying we shouldn't use game master. I'm just saying, should we? One of the things when we started out on this project was to say, we're going to question each of these things. We're not just going to do it because we've always done it that way. So help join in on that. We're talking about it on the Cool Name RPG Facebook page. We're talking about it on Discord. Join in with us there. We're also talking a bit about monsters. So if you have some math chops and some statistical chops, you might want to join in there, because what we're trying to figure out is how can you utilize the saving throws for monster in a 5th edition monster with 5th edition rules, and use that to try to identify armor and defense scores, appropriate armor and defense scores for your creatures in your combat if you want to try to convert something over. So if you're looking for some fun math to do, that's what I'm working on right now as well, is trying to figure out how do we do that and come up with a logical conversion that keeps the same statistical probability using the Cool Name RPG system instead of the 5th edition system. So join us. Come talk to us. And in the meantime, our consulting designers are working now. Look, their next project isn't due until April 3rd. Okay. So you're not going to see anything too soon from them. So just be patient. It is coming and they are working on it. That's it for now. Thank you all for watching. It was always great to have everybody here and have all of you watching. Very excited to hear how your Cool Name RPG adventures are going. And we will talk to you more soon. Have a great night and a great game.